The reason I'll push
but I
back
will say
is
this:
go ahead.
the one that actually matters to me more than the case fatality rate is what the case fatality rate looks like for young, healthy people.
Ah, the conservative movement, always talking about how pro life they are. We are so pro life. The left, the liberals, they're the party of death. Those evil progressives. I am just a kind, Christian, good hearted, God fearing conservative. And I don't believe in euthanasia like the liberals do. The left, they believe in euthanasia. They want to kill old people. They're just so awful. They're just like the Nazis. At the same time, though, I'm a huge supporter for the Center for Immigration Studies, huge supporter of Numbers USA, and I just love those beautiful, courageous, brave Europeans who are standing up for their right to be proud to be white. So I'm just a really, really good conservative. For decades, we have been fighting for being pro-life. We have been fighting for the unborn. At the same time, though, for decades, the conservatives have been boasting about how pro-life they are. They've been talking about, how the liberals are the party of death and how the liberals, they just want to kill the elderly. And it is true, a lot of leftists, a lot of liberals, they believe in euthanasia. A lot of liberals, a lot of leftists, they want to enact policies that would kill the elderly. Of course, they would start out with assisted suicide, but then, the snowball effect, it would, eventually escalate into just killing elderly people without even their consent. Sorry, old man. Okay, boomer, you don't want to die now? Doesn't matter. But let's talk about the conservatives. We have a pandemic, over 80,000 people dead. This virus, this contagion, especially kills those who are elderly. It kills old people and those who have weak immune systems, those who have pre-existing conditions. And the conservatives are acting like full-out Malthusian Darwinist fanatics. Because what these conservatives are saying is, well, coronavirus isn't that big of a deal because it only kills the elderly and the sick. And isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that for decades, the conservatives in the United States have been portraying the left as the ones who want to kill the elderly, kill the handicapped, kill those who are weak, and the left are the Darwinists. And I'm not denying the Darwinian inclinations of the left. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to defend the left. I am here to reveal all of the Darwinism of the conservatives that the conservatives try to hide with religion and moral principles and, the Constitution. The left, at least they're honest about what they want. The left they're pretty open about what they want. They're blatantly evil. The conservatives, on the other hand, they will hide their evils. They will hide their Darwinism with an American flag and a cross. And so the conservatives are the ones who are like, oh, it just kills the elderly. Don't worry about it, man. Who cares? Don't worry about it. Just the elderly, they can die by the wayside. There was an Italian guy, I think he was a journalist, I'm not sure, but I remember reading this 2 months ago when coronavirus really hit hard in the United States, and it was really devastating Italy. And he said that what we are beginning to notice is a different kind of discrimination than what we're used to. It's a different kind of discrimination than what we're used to. We're used to, discrimination against people for their skin color or things like that, because they're women or whatever. And he says that we are seeing a new form of discrimination against the elderly. And he says it comes in the form of people saying things like, don't worry, it just kills the elderly, as though the elderly are less important. It's as though the conservatives are saying, hey, listen, you're a good, nice boomer, you play your golf, but go out, live life like normal. Don't worry, it'll kill you, but hey, at least our American way of life is going to be perpetuated. It's going to be preserved. Our American way of life. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Doritos, and stuffy hot Cheetos, and all that good stuff. And don't worry, the strip clubs, they need to be reopened. We've been having drive-through strip clubs. People are having to get on their cars and watch the women strip from their cars. And, they can eat their KFC and their baby back ribs as they watch this woman denude herself. But it's terrible. It's a stab on the back on our American way of life. We should have the right just to walk into that strip club and look at those women naked without having to stay in our cars. It's a shame. They're destroying our way of life. They are destroying the Constitution. They are destroying our freedoms. And if I want to if I want to go to a strip club, then dang it, I have a right to do that. Coronavirus is destroying our way of life. So, boomer, go in there. We know you have a weak immune system. You're probably taking Viagra because your body's breaking down, but it doesn't matter. What matters is our way of life. And if I want to eat baby back ribs in a strip joint without having some cop telling me to wear a mask, then dang it, I have my God-given constitutional right. This is pretty much what the conservatives are saying. Who cares about community? Those savage Palestinians, those barbarian, inferior, low IQ Palestinians, they're so stupid and low IQ for actually getting together as a community and protecting the community from the spread of coronavirus. That's why the Palestinians have a much lower rate of coronavirus than their Israeli neighbors, their high IQ Israeli neighbors. And all those high IQ people in New York City who did a funeral in the middle of the street with hundreds and hundreds of people, even though they're in the middle of a pandemic, even though they wanted to do a funeral for a guy who died of coronavirus, they're very, very high IQ people. Very, very high IQ. Damn that de Blasio, Mayor de Blasio. What a shame that guy is for telling those people not to do that. Shame on him. Meanwhile, we're talking about, it doesn't matter, kill the elderly. And you'll have Palestinians who'll say things like, no, I want to protect my parents. I want to protect my grandparents. I want to protect my wife and my children. I don't want them to get coronavirus. I don't know, those people are uncivilized. Or this other story that I heard from Florida, the great state of Florida. There was a lady in a Republican district, by the way, who is a nurse. And she said, hey, listen, I'm a nurse. And if I get coronavirus, I don't want to go into my house and not potentially, if she goes into her house with coronavirus, she will infect her family. It's just 100%. So she said, listen, if I get coronavirus, I don't want to go into my house and infect my husband and my children. Don't want to do that. So what does she do? She gets a trailer, like a good citizen who cares about her community. And I'm not saying that facetiously. She gets herself a trailer, or I think it was an RV, one of those, puts it in front of her house, and she says, listen, if I get coronavirus, I'm going to stay in this RV. And if somebody else gets coronavirus, maybe someone in the neighborhood gets coronavirus, they can go into the RV. They can be quarantined. If a member of her family got coronavirus, they could go into the RV. And she was doing the right thing. It was an action that had a sense of community. What does her neighborhood do? What do her neighbors do? They put a bunch of notes in front of her house saying, get that RV off the front lawn. It's an eyesore. It's lowering the property value. They went to the HOA and they tried to get the HOA to push this woman to get rid of her RV. Didn't matter that she could have gotten coronavirus as a nurse and she wanted to protect her family. Didn't matter. What matters is the HOA. Homeowners Association. What matters is the property value and the curb appeal. And yes, this was in a Republican district. Pro-life people, supposedly. We really need to relook how we see the term pro-life, because the term pro-life within American vernacular just means you're against abortion. We need to widen that meaning. It doesn't just mean you're against abortion. It also means you're against your neighbors and your community and your country from getting utterly devastated by a virus. And I love how conservatives, they love to talk about unity between Americans when it's about going against Muslim terrorists or when it's about going against migrants from Central America. But when it comes to a microscopic enemy that you cannot see, that is actually more dangerous than any terrorist or any narco drug addict or drug dealer, not drug addict, drug dealer, all of a sudden there's no unity. All of a sudden it's fend for yourself. All of a sudden it's okay, boomer, you can go ahead and die. And then you have the conservatives who say things like, well, no, this coronavirus thing, it's all about a one world order. How could this be about a one world order when the coronavirus is splitting countries up? It is intensifying rivalry between countries. The Japanese were supposedly bettering their relations with China. Coronavirus hits, oh, that's all out the window. Japan is now incentivizing its companies to bring production back to Japan and not in China. The United States is intensifying its rivalry with China over this whole coronavirus thing. Nigel Farage said, well, thank God we did Brexit, because if we didn't do it, we would all be stuck in the European Union. We'd be like Italy. Sounded like an Indian accent there. And it's amazing that these conservatives, they'll sit there and say, well, it's in the Bible. The Bible says that there's going to be a one world government. Apparently, Bill Gates is in Bible prophecy now. And how is this possible? How is this possible when Jesus says explicitly, nation will fight against nation? How could you have a one world government when you have major superpowers in the world competing against themselves? You have Japan versus China, Russia versus the United States. You think the United States is just going to sit there and say, okay, Mr. Gates, okay, Billy, let's have a one world order? You can't be this freaking naive. And if you want to use the Bible, Jesus says that nation will rise against nation. How can nation rise against nation? How can nations rise against each other without nationalism, without a sense of national and tribal pride? This is why I keep saying nationalism is going to rise up. And the whole current day global order that you conservatives keep complaining about, don't worry, it's all going to disappear pretty soon. It's going to disappear. It's going to be warped into something much more dangerous. And you're going to say, well, no, they're getting rid of our freedoms, and this is going to end up in some sort of tyrannical rule. You know, you may be right. I'm not going to deny that. It may, we may end up having more and more laws against the freedoms that we otherwise would be enjoying right now. But then what happens when nationalism rises up and you have a populist government take over? You don't think that nationalist political party that you're going to revere is going to use those draconian measures against you? You don't think they would do that? Because I'm telling you right now, if a Republican administration or a Democrat administration, doesn't matter, begins to implement draconian laws because of coronavirus, and they do so to curtail the pandemic, and then you get pissed off and then you vote for some crazy populist party or you vote for some crazy nationalist, you don't think those far right or far left fanatics would use those measures for a different reason? This is the danger with nationalism. Power truly lies in the hands of the people. It doesn't lie in the hands of some group of elites. It doesn't lie in the hands of some CEOs. It lies in the hands of the masses. The masses ultimately have all the power. There was an Anglican theologian back in the 1500s. His last name was Hooker. Weird last name. I'm not trying to be facetious. That was his last name. But Hooker, he wrote a book on the nature of government. Richard Hooker, that was his name. And years ago, I read this book, and it was about on the nature of the state. And Hooker makes a very astute observation. He says that ultimately all political power is in the hands of the people. This was in the 1500s, by the way. This wasn't like Thomas Jefferson. This was like, King Henry VIII. We're going to cut your head off if you don't bow down to, the British crown type of thing. But he said that power ultimately lies in the hands of the people. He said even if you have a hardcore, strict monarchy where the king is in power, regardless, still, the people are the ones who have the power, because the people have the numbers and therefore they have the strength and the capacity to overthrow the king. They could overthrow the king. In fact, dictatorships and monarchies are a lot easier to overthrow than democracies or republics, because in dictatorships and monarchies, all you need to do is get enough people to join your cause to overthrow one guy. You just overthrow one guy, and that's it. You get rid of his family, and you take over. Power ultimately lies in the hands of the people. What the people want, the people will get. The reason why we have all these laws that a lot of us really don't like is because we put up with it. People ultimately can change if they do civil disobedience. It's like in a neighborhood. Let's say chickens are forbidden in your neighborhood, right? And let's say one guy gets chickens, second guy gets chickens, third guy gets chickens, fourth, fifth. Pretty soon you have a dozen people with chickens. Pretty soon you have dozens of people with chickens. You think the HOA is going to stop you? No. Because power ultimately lies in the hands of the people. Those who are governing will simply do what people want in order to stay in power, because they want to prevent a revolution against them. It's why dictators are so loved by their people many times, because dictators and kings will do what people want because they want to stay in power. They want money. They want, the women, the big fancy dinners. They love the lifestyle. They love that elitist lifestyle. So if people begin to think, well, we're under the control of some crazy globalist elites, we need nationalism and populism, then they're going to get nationalism and populism, because that's what they want. They are the great majority. So you're going to have some crazy nationalism. Eventually, countries are going to go to war, and you are going to have another world war. It really is that simple. I don't have to do a 50-minute long documentary on Bill Gates to tell you what's going to happen. I simply look at history, I look at the patterns, and I find parallels to today. And I can tell you right now, nationalism is increasing. The conspiracy theories about Bill Gates and one world governments, that's only exasperating the whole situation, and it's intensifying nationalism. And so eventually you're going to have nationalism, and you're going to have global conflict. And in the midst of this whole brewing situation, you have a bunch of conservatives who are saying, we're nationalists, doesn't matter how dangerous nationalism is, and we don't like being told what to do because we are rebellious, and we don't really give a damn about our community because it's just old people who are the biggest victims. And amazingly, these people call themselves Christians, but yet they ignore the verse in the Bible, in the Book of Wisdom. And maybe because the Book of Wisdom is in the Catholic Bible, you guys ignore it. But in the Book of Wisdom, chapter 2, it says, and this statement is from the voice of the wicked. The wicked are described in this book. And the book describes the wicked as saying, let us oppress the righteous poor man. Let us not spare the widow, or regard the gray hairs of the aged. In other words, kill the elderly. And the ones who really don't care about the elderly are the ones who call themselves pro-life, which is the biggest irony of it all. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed this message. Hope you guys have learned something from this message. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.